Welcome to the Scruffy Nazarene podcast. I'm so glad you found your way here. If you haven't already, please go back and listen to our episode 1. It talks a little bit about who we are and the reasoning behind this podcast. If you've already listened to that episode, then please enjoy today's episode. Hey there, family. So I want to start this episode off by asking you a question. And if you've ever, heard me preaching, live or in real life, I guess you could say, since, this is digital and you're a captive audience, or not really. You're not a captive audience, but people sitting in a church pew kind of are. And so if you've ever heard me preach, you'll know that one of the things that I love to do is I love to start with a question. And tonight is going to be no different. We're going to start with the question of, have you ever been through a wilderness experience? So, for those of you who may not know what the wilderness experience is, right? That's a term that is used by the church that relates to the time that the children of Israel spent traveling the wilderness, covered in the book of Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. This is traditionally seen as a time where, let's just go with the person, right? This is a time where the person is going through what they may consider to be a dry spell in their prayer life, a dry spell in their worship. They may feel like they are struggling spiritually, emotionally, just whatever's going on, right? There's something going on. They don't feel exactly right. Things just don't seem to be 100% copacetic with their life with God. And it's not necessarily anything that is, a sin or anything in their life that's keeping them from that good relationship and right relationship with God. It's most of the time it has something to do with God trying to teach them something. And if you're like me, you don't like to learn lessons. You're kind of hard-headed, and sometimes God has to be a little more forceful with his lessons. He has to get your attention a little harder. And, some of us are like that. It happens. So now that I've kind of explained to you what that looks like, I'm going to ask my question again. Have you ever had a wilderness experience? I can say that I have. I've been through a couple of them in my life. Would I say it's fun? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Would I say that I came out of it on the other side a different person? Yes. Did God change me into something else? Yes. But I had to go through that wilderness experience in order for me to come out on the other side changed. So tonight, I want to focus on what happened with the children of Israel. Our anchor verse for tonight is going to be Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 2. I'm using the NKJV tonight just because I like the way it words it. But the New King James Version, Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 2 says, "It is 11 days' journey from Horeb by way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea." So, Horeb is the name of a mountain. It's another name for Mount Sinai. Right? So, and this is Moses talking to the people of Israel. And essentially, he looks at them and says, you know what? It was 11 days' journey for us to get from Mount Sinai to get to Kadesh Barnea, where we were standing on the side, or on the side of the Jordan opposite the promised land. So let me let me get you to this point, right? So, little backstory. We're going to start back a little ways. We're going to go all the way back to Joseph and the coat of many colors, right? And then we're going to get here. So, and we're going to go through this kind of fast. So all the way back in Genesis, Jacob got renamed Israel, had 12 sons, one of them named Joseph. Joseph gets sold into slavery by his brothers. He then gets sent to Egypt and becomes a powerful ruler. There is a famine in the land, and Joseph has the ability to save all of his family members, and they all move to Egypt and live happily ever after, right? No, not really. They live there for a long time, and generation after generation, the children of Israel grow, and the Pharaoh, the leader of Egypt, saw that and said, there's an entire army growing inside of our borders of people that are not my subjects. And so he puts them into slavery. And so the children of Israel go into slavery, and they cry out to God, and eventually God hears their cries, and he saves Moses from being slaughtered. The Pharaoh was afraid that the males of the Israelites would band together and create a giant army and just obliterate his people. But God saved Moses, set him up in the palace in Egypt. He was raised by the daughter of the Pharaoh until such a time that Moses makes a mistake, kills an Egyptian man, and then flees into the wilderness. See, there's a theme right there. We're already starting to see a theme. Moses fled into the wilderness, where he lived for 40 years as a shepherd, where he learned to be humble, where he learned to follow God. And then God says, all right, Moses, you've spent enough time out here herding sheep. Let's go. I've got a plan for you. You're going to go back. I've heard the wailing of the children of Israel, and you're going to go and lead them out of bondage. And if you know the story, Moses says, why me? I don't think I want to do that. That doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun. I'm not qualified. God says, I don't care. You're going to go do it. I'm going to send some people to help you. You're going to go do it, whether you want to or not. Come on, you've been called. Get up, start moving. So Moses leaves the wilderness, goes 10 plagues. Moses telling Pharaoh, God says, let my people go. Made a whole Charlton Heston movie out of it, that kind of thing. But anyway, the children of Israel, after the 10th plague, the Pharaoh finally says, you know what? I'm tired of looking at all these Israelites. Get out of here. I'm done. I can't fight this anymore. I can't handle this anymore. I want you out of here. So they all load up and they go to the Red Sea. Took them about 4 days. And in that 4-day time, they kind of forgot what happened in Israel, or what happened in Egypt, right? What they just saw. God called down fire from the heavens. God caused all the firstborn children in Egypt to die. God sent a plague of frogs and a plague of flies and a plague of boils and turned water into blood. And in 4 days' time, the children of Israel forgot all that because they were faced by the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army coming up behind them. So God says, all right, let's remind you who I am again. So he tells Moses, go stretch out your rod over the Red Sea. And Moses does it, and it parts, and the children of Israel walk across on dry land. They start traveling, and they travel, and they travel, and they travel till they get to Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai. And when they get to Mount Sinai, you know how the story goes. Moses goes up on the mountain and spends, spends roughly 45 days up there receiving the 10 commandments from God in the presence of God. And the whole time, The presence of God is on top of this mountain. Moses comes down. The children of Israel have done some really stupid stuff. Moses loses his temper, smashes the tablets that he got from God, goes back up to the mountain. God gives him new tablets. Moses comes down, and the children of Israel, they repent. They're sorry. And then they spend roughly about the next year living at the foot of Mount Sinai with the presence of God on top of the mountain above them. That's important. The children of Israel spend nearly a year with the presence of God directly with them. Not off in some faraway place, not up in heaven, not, no, they spend a year basically sitting at the feet of where God chose to be at on earth for a year. This is important. So, they've been there a year. They build the tabernacle. They do all the things. And then God says, all right, time to load up. Let's go. And they say, where are we going? And God says, you're going to the promised land. All right, God, let's go. So they all set out, and it takes them 11 days to walk to the Jordan River. Well, before they go in to take the land, they decide they want to spy it out. And so they send 12 spies, one from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. They go in, they look all around, and when they come back, the first 2 spies give their report, and they say, this is a land flowing with milk and honey. There are bunches of grapes so large that 2 men can't carry them. This land is rich and wealthy, and it is ripe for the taking, for God is with us. Their names are Caleb and Joshua, by the way, in case you're wondering. That comes up later after, Deuteronomy, in the story of Joshua, actually. But the other 10 are afraid, and they say, we can't do this. We're not ready. There's giants. There's terrifying people. They're stronger than us. They're meaner than us. They're richer than us. They have nicer toys. They can do all the things that we can't do. And so the Israelites say, we're not going to do it, God. We're not going to follow you. We're not going to follow you into the promised land. And so God, I just see God kind of being like a father that's, has a willful child. He just kind of sits there and takes his glasses off and sighs real big, kind of rubs the bridge of his nose and his forehead like he's getting a headache, and says, all right, have it your way. None of those of you who refuse to enter the promised land and take it when I gave it to you will be allowed to enter. And then he sends them off into the wilderness to wander for 40 years. So, the children of Israel, they go into the wilderness and they wander. And they wander, and they wander, and they wander. And if you ever look at the map and you do some reading, they essentially walked in a great big circle for 40 years in the wilderness, just outside of Kadesh Barnea. And if it wasn't so sad, it would almost be comical, because the entire time they griped and complained, even though they were the reason that they were doing this, right? They were their own worst enemies in that. They were the reasons that this was happening to them. They made bad choices. They made mistakes. And so it forced them into the wilderness. Now, I'm not saying that every time we wind up in the wilderness, it's because we've done something wrong. The traditional view, right, of the children of Israel wandering in the desert is one of punishment. God is punishing them for being disobedient. And while that is correct, right? That's correct. You can also look at it as a time of molding and shaping, where God was getting the children of Israel ready to do what needed to be done. If you look at the children of Israel as one big entity, right? There were things inside of them that were holding them back from worshiping God. There were things inside of them that were holding them back from being obedient to God. And sometimes the reason that we go through the wilderness experience is because we forget who the God is that we serve. Back to our anchor verse, for Deuteronomy chapter 1-2, it says it's 11 days journey from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea. They spent a year in the presence of God, watching the power of God manifest itself over their very heads, listening to the commands that were given to them directly by God through Moses. And they still managed to forget in 11 days' time who it was that they served. They forgot who God was in 11 days' time. They forgot about the fact that he was the God who split the sea so that they could walk on dry land, that brought down plagues upon the Egyptians so that they could be freed from slavery, that fed them morning and night with manna from heaven because they cried out and said, God, we are hungry. Feed us. They forgot who they served. They forgot who they worshiped. And God had to remind them. God had to remind them who he was. And you know, sometimes when we go through the wilderness experience, it's because we've forgotten who it is that we serve. We've forgotten who it is that we are bowing our heads to and praying, pouring out our hearts to. We have forgotten who it is that we raise our hands and we worship and we sing and we join with the angels and we say, holy, holy, holy are you, Lord God Almighty. We forget who it is we're talking about and who we're talking to and who we serve and the things that he has done for us. And that's what lets us be in that wilderness place. It's not fun to be in the wilderness. I know, I've been there a couple of times. But I never come out of it the same. Quick story, and then I'll let you go, family. Some of you know this, some of you don't. I'd say probably the majority of you who might eventually listen to this may not even know this story. But I went through a strong time or a long time in the wilderness. I spent nearly a year unable to work. I spent nearly a year unable to provide for my family because of a nerve issue in my left knee. And I say it like that because when it originally happened, I thought that it was a structural problem. And I went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and they could not find anything structurally wrong with my knee. They could not find anything that made sense as to why it caused me so much pain, crippling pain, that it would put me on the ground, curled up in a ball, crying, that it would lay me up for days at a time, that I didn't feel like I could get out of bed. It got bad enough to the point that I had to resign from my job, and I started to isolate, even in my own home. Isolate from my wife, isolate from my kids. And I felt like I was in the wilderness. I felt like I was far from God. I was distant from God. And one day, I remember I had fairly recently picked up a Charles Spurgeon study Bible before this happened, and it was there beside the bed, and I picked it up and I just started reading, and I started praying through the Psalms. And the whole time, the whole time I spent laid up, God provided for my family and I. God was teaching me something during that time, right? He was teaching me that I couldn't rely on myself. I needed to rely on Him. He took away my ability to pay for everything, pay my bills, to pay the car payment, to buy things that my family might need, to buy groceries. He took away my ability to do all of that, and instead forced me to live on His providence. I had to rely on God's providence for nearly a year and a half. And my bills were paid. There was always food in the house. My kids never went without. My wife and I didn't go without. We had a roof over our heads. God took care of us. And I had to learn that. I had to learn it the hard way. I had to go through the wilderness to see that. It wasn't fun. But I look back on it now and I know that I would not be who I am today if God had not pushed me through that time. Because God used that time not only to teach me that I needed to rely on Him completely, but also He used that time to draw me to Him closer. I studied my Bible more than I had ever studied. I dug into scriptures more than I had ever dug into them. I sought Him. I prayed. I yearned for God during that time. He was preparing me to do what He was calling me to do. I just didn't realize it at that point. So, with that being said, I want you to understand a couple of things about the wilderness, and then I'm going to let you go. The first thing I want you to understand is that the wilderness does have an end. You won't be in it forever. Second thing I need you to understand is the wilderness is always intentional. God never sends you into the wilderness without a purpose. He has a reason for having you there. He has something that He wants you to learn. He has something that He needs you to know. He is trying to shape you and mold you into something. The wilderness has a purpose. And lastly, if you will let it, the wilderness will change your life and your relationship with God. You will come out of it stronger. You will come out of it more reliant on God, and you will come out of it praising Him. I love you, family, and I'm praying for you. This is the Scruffy Nazarene, signing off.